The bombing of Pearl Harbor brought America into World War II. America and their allies, France, Poland, and the United Kingdom feared that the Nazis were developing a nuclear weapon. Albert Einstein, with consultation from Leo Szilard, told Franklin D. Roosevelt to keep, quote, watchfulness and, if necessary, quick action, unquote, on the matter of nuclear weapons. This showed that Einstein wanted the Allies, the name of the anti-Nazi countries fighting for freedom, to be wary of their actions, as well as to start their own research in nuclear weapons. The Allies did not want the Germans to create their own weapons of mass destruction first, and then to capitalize on this by destroying their enemies. Einstein was a German physicist that fled Germany once the Nazi regime took over Germany. Leo Szilard was a Hungarian-American physicist and inventor who took part of the Manhattan Project. Another factor that led up to the creation of the atomic bomb was the advancements in neurology, physics, and the discovery of plutonium and uranium. These were deadly discoveries because they funded the idea of a nuclear weapon. Also, the British, who were deeply failing at the plight of the Germans, were urging the Americans to create this bomb and end the war for good. Vannevar Bush, on November 27, 1941, sent a letter to President Roosevelt saying that this bomb was possible as well. This led them to found their own project to develop their own nuclear weapons using plutonium and uranium. They called this the Manhattan Project.
You have multiple groups, organizations, and so on. But in the end, all of these, a number of these organizations would not have been useful in the Manhattan Project if there had been no design for a practical and deliverable nuclear weapon. And that design was accomplished at the Los Alamos National Laboratory, well, what's now the National Laboratory, but the Los Alamos Lab in New Mexico, under the leadership of J. Robert Oppenheimer, the physicist.
The Manhattan Project was a research of the atomic bomb, and if possible, the creation of one. This took place in Los Alamos, New Mexico, from 1942 until 1946, under the leadership of Robert Oppenheimer. He was one of the most important scientists and was a great part of this idea. Robert Oppenheimer was an American theoretical physicist and professor of physics at the University of California, Berkeley. He was born in New York on April 22, 1904. He was the one who spearheaded the project with Major General Leslie Groves of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Oppenheimer was the appointed scientific director of the Manhattan Project. Major General Leslie Groves was an engineer, but most importantly, he had strong administrative abilities. General Groves was born in Albany, New York, on August 17, 1896, and on September 1942, he was placed in charge of the Manhattan Engineer Project. The project originally took place in Manhattan, New York, but only for a brief time, but was moved to Los Alamos for more privacy. There are many laboratories and facilities in many places around the United States. Some places were Oak Ridge, Tennessee, and Hanford, Washington. The main part of the project was undertaken in Los Alamos because it was a very remote area, which provided them with the secrecy and space they needed. The Manhattan Project eventually resulted in the first nuclear bomb ever created, as well as Trinity Test, which was the testing of the atomic bomb before the dropping on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. It was conducted on July 6, 1945 in New Mexico, near the Los Alamos facility. This test was carried out by the United States Army on July 16, 1945. This was a test of an implosion-designed plutonium device.
There can be no peace in the world until the military power of Japan is destroyed.
After the surrender of the Germans, Japan was left alone to fight against the Allies. Although they knew that they would not achieve victory, they promised never to surrender. Harry Truman said in the Potsdam Declaration that they would induce Japan with prompt and utter destruction if Japan did not surrender. The Americans were very sure-footed that they would win this war, and many top military officials favored the continuous bombings and invasions to Japan. But they advised Truman that these invasions would have caused up to 1 million casualties of U.S. soldiers. Harry Truman and a few scientists that partook in the Manhattan Project all agreed that dropping the atomic bomb would be beneficial for America and result in avoiding such a high casualty rate. This was for the right of America and maybe even Japan. The bombing was the equivalent of 20,000 tons of TNT, and it was dropped over Hiroshima, Japan on August 6, 1945. Once Japan recuperated from this huge blast, America hit them again 3 days later, at Nagasaki, Japan, on August 9, 1945. The combined explosions resulted in the destruction of 16 square miles, as well as destroying 267,000 buildings and homes. These bombings were significant enough to wreck homes and destroy lives, as well as make the Japanese surrender. In Japan, approximately 90 to 160,000 people died from these bombings. Not all of these deaths were from the direct strike of the bomb. Many were caused by the leftover radiation of the bomb, which also resulted in failed births and mutations. Japan was broken. Families were torn apart. Homes were destroyed.
Father John Zymus tells what he actually saw. An eyewitness account.
I was in my room, which faces the valley, and suddenly I saw a light, like magnesium light, flashlight, which filled the whole valley. And looking out of my window to find out the reason for this peculiar phenomena, I saw nothing besides this light. And turning from the window to the door of my room, I heard a crash. It may have been 10 seconds after seeing the light, the flashlight. And immediately I was covered with splinters of the window frames and glass sticking into the walls and actually in my flesh itself.
This bombing was a dramatic turning point in modern warfare. The threat of a bomb to destroy a country took place. The carefulness of what you do and say. It ruled over people and commanded them. This bomb did more than kill Japanese people. It also saved many Americans from dying and ended the war. Before the bombing, the Nazis had already surrendered from World War II, but the surrender of Japan ended it. This was also the first real testing of this massive bomb. It put different countries in a state of mind, a state of carefulness of your actions, that if you act out, you could be punished with a nuclear bomb. Also, this bomb changed the idea of warfare. Since multiple nations now own this bomb, if one country bombs another, a massive chain reaction could occur and eventually result in many countries being obliterated. People are more careful about wars now. This one bomb resulted in a nuclear arms race with other countries. In other words, the Cold War. People fear this bomb, the helplessness of it, and the idea that when it drops, there is nothing you can do. Once it hits the ground and you're near it, you will die. Your life will be ended.
From the instant of that first blast until Hiroshima vanished from the list of